Hi, I'm Greg Thompson. I'm with Thompson Wealth Partners of RBC Dominion Securities, and today I'm joined by my associate Rob Smith and Dominick Hardy of RBC Dominion Securities. He is with our portfolio advisory group and helps us with managing client portfolios. Just a little background on Dom. He's been with our firm for many, many years. He comes from the income trust world. If anybody remembers those, you're long in the tooth, but adds a lot of value to us. And when we're looking at portfolios and different sectors and just the current investment environment. Today, we want to talk about what is happening with the North American Free Trade Agreement, the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA, NAFTA, whatever you want to call it. It is in the news everywhere, and it is a big deal. So most recently, it came up for renewal, and the three governments had the choice to either renew, and that would last another 16 years. Dom, was that it?
Correct.
Yeah, 16 years, or it goes, or it sets in motion a renewal process if they don't agree. Mexico and Canada voted to extend it for the 16 years. Not surprisingly, the U.S. administration did not. So with the U.S. administration not extending it for the next 16 years, is this a debt agreement now, or what does Canadian business and Mexico business have to deal with?
It's a good question, by the way. It's not a debt agreement. There's a mechanism in place. So essentially, the current deal doesn't expire till 2036. So as opposed to having a 16-year extension and then re-looking at it after 16 years, essentially it sort of hits the deadline and it expires in 2036, but it's subject to annual reviews. So depending on how the U.S. administration wants to play it, this could be subject to long, lengthy renewal process. And then looking at what sectors they're trying to either protect in the U.S. or put tariffs on. I think the U.S. administration has made it clear that they're looking at tariffs as a revenue source. And if you look at the budget that was in place before Trump took power, the deficit was expected to be about $2 trillion. And one way to cut that deficit, and the deficit is meaningful, if you look at a percentage of GDP, we're about 7 to 8%. So essentially, you either have to cut expenses, which they tried to do, but a lot of those expenses can't be cut. You can't cut interest expense, hard to cut defense and military, social security. So the option is cut expenses, which I tried to do, and then raise revenues. No one likes to have taxes increased, especially Americans. So tariffs, even though it's paid by Americans, is not all of a sudden viewed as a tax because it protects jobs, even though we could argue whether it doesn't protect the right jobs, yes or no. So Mr. Trump has made it clear that he likes tariffs. And so that's one reason he is looking at this USMCA and thinks they could do a better deal. By the way, he did put this deal in place during his first term. It came in power in July of 2020, 6-year renewal, July 2026, and now it sets off the mechanism. So it'll be around for another 20 years. Sorry, 10 years. Doing the math there to 2036, 10 years.
When he signed the deal, he hailed it as historically the best deal. So it is interesting now that it's not the best deal. And, times do change and things do need to be renegotiated. So, everything needs to be updated.
So I have a question for you, Dom and Greg, just to add to your introduction there. Dom, for those of you, I guess everyone who doesn't know, Dom is the voice of our morning call every morning to all the DS advisors nationwide. So it's an honor to have him on once again. But, just we're talking about the deal here. What are the next steps? What are, investors, what will we see kind of coming forward in the next few months here?
So we're looking, and by the way, RBC Economics, and by the way, has written about this. They've done a great job. So I do want to give them props because I rely on them extensively. Same with RBC Global Asset Management. So there's always more literature, more podcasts. If your clients want to have some more, definitely point them in that direction. Our three economies are intertwined. And essentially, it's been developed since NAFTA started. And a lot of industries rely on different countries. I'll give you an example. We're talking to auto parts analysts this week, And he says some auto parts cross the border 8 to 16 times before that one part is finished. So obviously we're looking at what sector could the US attack and which one are we trying to protect. So the ones that are heaviest at risk, by the way, is auto parts. And at the same time, it's interesting because originally he wanted 25% tariffs on car parts. And if you're looking at Japan, got a 15% tariff. So built the whole car in Japan, ship it into the US, it's 15%. So at the same time, if I'm a US automaker, I probably won't accept a 25% tariff on an auto part I'm building here. So that's sector, and that's an important part of the Ontario economy, part of Quebec. So sectors that could be hit hard if the deal were to change on the annual review process: auto parts, machinery and parts, plastics, aluminum's already been hit hard, which impacts Quebec, and wood, which impacts more the Western provinces, but also parts of Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. And that's been through the softwood lumber. So those are parts that could be hit. By the way, I do want to mention, because it's important to mention that 90% of the goods that are produced actually are part of the USMCA and are exempt from tariffs and get into the US from Canada without those tariffs. So most everything is exempt from the tariffs except for the special tariffs he wants to put in place. And if you were to do away with this deal, the tariff rate that is paid now for goods produced in Canada, sold into the US, is 3.2%. So RBC Economics tried to do a calculation and said, if you increase the tariffs, if the deal ends, the tariffs would go to about 6.6%. So just a little more than double. As far as what's the tariff rate compared to other countries, essentially Thailand and UK would be lower tariff selling to the US, but we sell most of our imports into the US. So as a dollar figure, it would impact a lot. And that's something that's important. The other part that's important too, there's 22 states that number one trading partner is Canada. So it works both ways. For us, it's a bigger percentage of our export compared to the US. But that's one thing we're looking for, is what industry could be hit and what sector is he trying to protect. So far, aluminum, steel is a sector he's trying to protect. Lumber, also trying to protect. And that's been going on for years, though the lumber issue predated Mr. Trump coming into power.
The lumber issue predated me, starting with Nesbitt Thompson 30 years ago. So it's kind of crazy, Well, you kind of actually answered my next question there as well. So I'm just going to skip my last question here. And obviously, Donald Trump, President Trump has stated in his book, The Art of the Deal, from, originally, like, he likes to keep everybody on tenterhooks. And so, there's definitely some uncertainty with this administration. Any final thoughts on the path forward? Anything you think our viewers and clients should be thinking about when they're looking at their portfolio and considering the ramifications of CUSMA negotiations?
There's a lot to consider. So on this CUSMA negotiation, one thing Trump wanted to do is bring back jobs to the US. And one thing you could argue is, like, the last thing they need is jobs. Their unemployment rate's 4.3%. You have an aging population that is having less kids, and migration slowing into the country. So any manufacturing job will be more a robotics job. The impact, though, you have companies making decision now, if they're allocating billions of capital to add manufacturing capacity, they are definitely, and you're seeing companies talk about it, either bringing back all or some of their manufacturing into the US, which is really important. The other part, and that I didn't touch on, is one thing that'll be more important is rules of origin. For example, Canada signed a deal with China to allow electric vehicles in. From my understanding and what I read and talked to our auto parts analysts, the high-end ones that are coming available, they're more expensive. They're in the $100,000 range. Essentially, Trump will be looking to Mexico and Canada and probably tighten up those rules of origin. So one thing Mr. Trump doesn't want is, he has high tariffs on China, but he doesn't want countries that he has high tariffs with to ship those goods into Canada and Mexico, and we incorporate them into peace and ship it into the US. So he's trying to protect that. A lot of people said, well, let's wait for the new administration and all this goes away. But if you look at the history of tariffs, when Trump put tariffs in place in his first term, Mr. Biden didn't take them away in the second term. So it doesn't mean that a new president, whether it's the Republican or Democrat, will have a different view on this. Maybe he or she does, but there's no view. So essentially, when we're looking at investments, we look at what's the impact on the company. Is the company a good global leader? So if your brand, if you're manufacturing and we're investing in your company, can your goods still sell because they're high quality? And do you have that competitive advantage? If you do, we worry about it, but not as much. What you have to worry is if it's a plain commodity or a product that can be replicated anywhere, then what you may see is jobs moving. Because if this deal, and it won't be, but if this deal is torn up tomorrow, and by the way, any of the three parties could sign 6 months notice and get out. And if we were subject to higher tariffs selling into the US, it'd have a negative impact on the Canadian economy, negative impact on employment, negative impact on growth. So it's important to us. At the same time, last time we were hit with tariffs from the US hard, and I believe it's in 1890, and it was the governor of Ohio that had the idea, put big tariffs on Canada, hurt their economy, and will incorporate Canada into our United States. And that was, I believe, William McKinley that had thought of the idea. At the time, what Canada did is found more trading partners, and at that time it was with the UK. So one thing we need our government to do is keep looking for trade agreements with other countries. At the same time, being part of the USMCA, you're sort of restricted who you can sign deals with to make sure it doesn't contravene the USMCA. So that's something our government needs to negotiate. So more agreements to trade, finding outside markets for Canadian producers is going to be key. And the other part too is redeveloping our resources and partnering with everybody who needs to be involved. And we've seen we're doing a better job than we have in the past. And I think that's key because now the world needs more commodities. And if we can develop those and find a market, that helps put Canadians at work, helps revenues at the municipal, provincial, and federal level. We just have to do it smartly and in cooperation with all the stakeholders.
Yeah. No, truer words were never said. We need to be less reliant on the United States. We need to increase our productivity in this country. And that would go a long ways to raising all Canadians' quality of life. You know, it's really interesting. I don't know if you have ever heard of a podcast called The Conversation with Rachel Shabir. It's from Politico. And I will end with this. If anybody gets a chance to go back and listen to her conversation with Jermaine Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, it is interesting just the vitriol they view other nations and their trading practices with the United States. And, you know, I think that is fueling a lot of this issue and the lack of extending is just the feeling they've been taken advantage of, which, you know, is probably pretty untrue. So if anybody is a trade nerd like me, go back and listen to that or call me and I will send it to you. Anyways, Dom, we really appreciate your time. This is great for our viewers, and we know that as things become clear, hopefully, we can come back to you and get updates. And I know you'll be working with us all the time behind the scenes to make sure our clients are best served and we're making the proper way with our portfolio. So thank you very much. I hope the heat doesn't kill you in Toronto. And Rob, any last words?
No, that was great. Thanks, Dom. Appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Talk to everyone later.
You bet. Take care.
Bye.